Yes, I've unmuted myself. Right. Shall I start? Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome for today's session. So, as promised, I said that I would be discussing the question paper of GS Paper 1 2023 mains. I know it has aroused a lot of curiosity, and many of you have been like waiting to get into this discussion mode. So, good afternoon to all of you. Did you get GS Society courses? Did you take? Oh, no. We'll talk about all the courses, Ritesh. Just raise that, like, on the relative management, form, or the contact numbers which have been given related to management. We'll just focus on the course. We'll just focus on the content. That's it. Okay. We are just going to reflect upon the possibility associated with what needs to qualify as the content part. All right. So in this given subsegment, we have this time, interesting fact is that this time we had a lot of questions. Like I have been always saying this for quite some time, that when you have understanding of society, you can be a better administrator, you can govern better. That's why we all can see that whether it is the component of essay or it is the subsegment related to GS, Indian society plays a very vital role. We could see this happening this time in section B of essay, whereby there was a topic related to education and one related to gender issues, which all of you could witness. And in GS paper 1, this area was associated with 105 marks out of 250 marks. The moment I saw the paper, I declared it on the Telegram page to all of you that just reflect upon this given scenario, whereby we are getting out of 250 marks, there is 105 marks. Now, I will be discussing these answers from two perspectives. One, from sociological insight, with students of sociology who are attending the session. What are the don'ts? Yes, more than the do's, what are the don'ts that you have to follow? And for the non-sociology background students who don't have to get scared when they are listening to the explanation that, oh my God, now it's sociology optional, which can help us pull through. No, I mean, sociology as an optional is great. And it can really help you in big ways, from reflecting upon the questions in the interview, having a purposive conversation with the board when you have to discuss upon a lot of issues pertaining to social significance, as well as essay and the component related to Indian society, social justice, all of it. But still, if you have any other optional, whether it is political science, pub-bad, anthropology, philosophy, mathematics, any segment related to engineering, literature, all optionals are good. All optionals are fetching. In every optional, a student can score very well. So please don't get intimidated by seeing so many questions of Indian society. But at the same time, stop treating it like an underdog area. Stop treating it like it's okay, I can just prepare it somehow. Some okay type notes will work. Some okay type of preparation will work. Every time I suggest that refer this book, this material, students, they have a laid back approach. Even if they complete NCERT, they have a sense of confidence. Oh, I completed NCERT, as if it's a big deal. I mean, you're reading GC Leong for geography along with 5 NCERTs. You are reading Vipin Chandra, you're reading 4 NCERTs for history, and still you're not regretting. 20-25 sessions you're dealing with it. So much of time and space a teacher is getting to explain herself or himself in these GS papers. But Indian society, barely 10 sessions. That too, half of you will be irregular about it. Then you will not do any reference reading. And then you'll get stuck up with these questions, which seem to be simplistic, at superficial level, but when you engage with the concepts or the content, it really creates a challenging possibility. So I will be discussing the questions. At the same time, in between the questions, I will take up your queries. I'll try to handle both simultaneously as far as it is possible. If I miss any of your questions, just trust the process. I will be taking it up later, or any reflection which I find is important is shared by you, I will definitely take it up later. All right, if I miss it, because there are different I would say places where I'm reflecting upon the questions. So there are like live session students open, there are students related to the batch, sociology batch, and everyone is chatting from different corners. So I'll have to keep opening different gadgets. So that's the only reason because of which I'm seeking your permission to respond to your answers, maybe with little pauses. Now, let's go with the questions. So first one, you can see it is, do you think marriage as a sacrament is losing its value in modern India? Now, pay attention to the question. Do you think? It is an opinion-based question, as you can see. It's asking for your opinion, whether marriage as a sacrament is losing its value in modern India. This question, 150 words. First and foremost, it's opinion-based. Second, is marriage truly a sacrament? Second, if it is a sacrament, then how is it losing its value? If not a sacrament, then what is it? And is it losing its value per se, or it's some other form of change if we are talking about it? And then with respect to modern India, what can we reflect upon? So here, as you all can see, as it is written, that I have given the entire language for few questions. Few questions I have not given the language. I have just left it that maybe later I'll support the content per se for all of you. I will post the answer for all of you. Those who are watching it through open YouTube channel, I'll post the link where you can find the notes and everyone can read that material. With the rest of you, you will find it in the form of supplementary class notes. Now, over here, when we are starting with it, first and foremost, is it a sacrament? With respect to Indian society or not. So we all get, first and foremost, whenever you're starting such an answer, the moment you say it as sacrament and you start talking about Hinduism, it won't be fair because India is a diverse country. So it is preferable. Now see, I will give you why this content, which is written over here, the logic behind this content. So the moment you're getting such a question, which is before all of you, first and foremost, reflect upon the possibility of this given introduction that when we are talking about it as a sacrament, we have to first reflect upon the diversity, because the more diverse the religion, okay, the higher the possibility of, we can say, the idea of sacrament being discussed from different religious perspectives. But can we delve in so much of detail when we are talking about 150 words? No, not really. So we can bring this context within probably a couple of sentences, 3 to 4 sentences on a high side. I've left it little stretched out because if I produce exactly 150 words, maybe you cannot create a similar content. So it is advisable that you read this content and make a slightly gist kind of content out of it. Okay. So first and foremost, when we are talking about India being diverse with respect to religious and cultural practices, we can consider that it is not considered as a sacrament with respect to theological sense. Theological sense means from religious perspective, whereby the religion itself is laying down its foundational principles, its insights pertaining to marriage being a sacrament. When we are talking about Catholicism, okay, so we can see in Catholicism, it is treated as a sacrament. In Hinduism, well, there are divided opinions associated with it. On one hand, there are few thinkers who consider it as a sacrament because it creates a rites deep passage. Rites deep passage means after getting married, a woman, especially a woman who is belonging to upper caste, born in an upper caste family, after the marriage with an upper caste man or a man belonging to her own caste, she is able to attain the status of a Dvija. You understand that any one of you who has studied caste system, there itself it is said that every child who is born is a born Shudra. But the upper caste children, they undergo the Upanayanam Sanskaram or the thread ceremony, or in North India it is called Janeu. So when they undergo the Upanayanam Sanskaram, we all can see that through that Sanskaram or through that thread ceremony, the upper caste boys are able to attain the higher caste status. With respect to women, they have to undergo marriage as a rites deep passage. because of which they attain an upper caste status, especially during the menstrual cycle. They again reduce to the, we can say, status of an untouchable, whereby they are segregated in their own household with respect to food or commensality or patterns of cooking and eating together. Okay, so she is segregated. These are some background information which is expected everyone should be knowing. All right. All this is not coming with so much of detail. You cannot write in 150 words. Had it been 250 words, then maybe you could have substantiated, or if in future there is a component related to untouchability or something like that, you can add more volume, more dimension to it. Okay. So here, anyway, when we are talking about it, so in Hindus, we can see the marriage is treated as a samskara or a rites of passage, rites de passage, DE, rites de passage also you can write. Okay, signifying transition from one stage of life to other. And these rituals, they are meant to invoke the blessings of deities and ancestors. That's why you'll see ancestor worship and deity worship both taking place when marriage is going on. Okay, and that's done for seeking the guidance and support for a happy and prosperous life. It is implicit. Now, in other religious communities also, we can see amongst Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists, we can see they have their own beliefs and customs related to marriage. And many of these customs, like as I told you, in Catholicism, there is this concept of sacrament. But in like Islam, it is a contractual relationship, right? So when we are talking about it, all the, we can say, traditions and customs which are associated with it, with the, like we can say, custom of marriage, it is somewhere aligned with the concept of, we can say, sacrament, and it is like somewhere connected to, somewhere close to the concept of sacrament, even if it is not literally treated as a sacrament per se. Okay, and that's why we can see there is a religious significance to the custom of marriage in majority of, we can say, like religious communities across India. There is a customary importance, there is a traditional importance per se, whether it is a sacrament or not, treated as a sacrament or not. Now the question is, do you think marriage as a sacrament? So first you are contesting the idea of sacrament itself, right? Whereby you are requesting the given possibility that, well, we can debate whether it is a sacrament or not. So first and foremost, you're suggesting that even if it is not treated quote unquote as a sacrament, a lot of rituals, customs are definitely associated with the custom of marriage. Very briefly, within 2 to 3 sentences. I know I have given you little stretched up content, but it is for your basic conceptual understanding. Now, getting back to the game, we can see it's written that additionally, in secular or non-religious context, marriage is a legal and social institution. Okay, so this is like in general what we can see. Now, the question is it losing its value in like modern India? So you can bring in the component of globalization, you can bring in the component of liberalization, you can bring in the component of privatization, and the emergence of liberal modern values, or we can say expansion of, not emergence, expansion of liberal modern values. Okay, and with the expansion of liberal and modern values, we all will be seeing that there will be somewhere a shift in the institution of marriage. Very briefly, again, you can enlist the nature of changes and trends that have emerged related to marriage in India. So, and never ever forget the question, keep memorizing the question, whether it is associated with, we can consider the component of like essay, or it is associated with GS. Always remember the question. See this, remember, just memorize this question. Do you think marriage as a sacrament is losing its value in modern India? So first you are debating over the issue of sacrament, then you are coming up with the insight that how marriage is still maintaining continuity of traditional practices, continuity of various types of customs, and at the same time undergoing change. Okay, so this component of continuity and change is what you end up discussing. Okay, so what are the patterns of change which we all can see in the component of marriage? So we all can see there is decline in marriage rates. We can see people are choosing to get into partnership. There are, we can say, open relationships, live-in relationships. There can be a sense of consensual relationship without staying together. So all those patterns will lead to decline in marriage rates. Another thing is changing in gender roles. We can see that like despite the marriage, the gender roles are changing because of the notions of patriarchy getting challenged, modernity shaping our ideas, perspectives pertaining to equality, pertaining to liberty, and all this will also lead to gender parity. It will lead to, we can say, equality in terms of gender roles and relations. We can also connect it with, like, let's say in marriage also equality is coming here. In marriage equality, what I imply to say, we can talk about the LGBTQ community, like contesting for their marriage getting legal recognition across the world. Okay, so we can see this marriage equality as a concept is also constantly emerging and negotiated. Marriageable age is getting pushed because of career, because of higher education, right? There is decline in arranged marriages, and because of decline in arranged marriage, we all can further see that there is a constant possibility of, we can consider there is a constant possibility in terms of this decline in arranged marriage, whereby we can see that the total number of, we can consider marriages that used to take place in terms of parents arranging the marriage. Nowadays, those numbers are reducing, though in urban areas also we can see technology is also assisting. Like, for example, the various matrimonial websites, the various counselors, online, offline. We could see the matchmaking, which was aired on Netflix, whereby Seema Auntie was doing international level matchmaking, right? So on one hand, we can see that arranged marriage is still in vogue, but it has not completely faded away. It has also caught up with the recent times, but at the same time, it is no more a sacramental relationship. The boy and the girl, or we can say the male and the female, they both are negotiating their own spaces, their own choices. They are trying to sometimes expand the choices with respect to identity, with respect to community. When I say community, I imply to say caste, religion, nationality, ethnicity. They're now negotiating with that. They're open to that given possibility. So that will also challenge the dimension of arranged marriage. Again, the redefining the purpose of marriage is happening when we speak of it, whereby it is no more a rites de passage, or we can say a customary necessity. It is more associated with seeking partnership, seeking, we can say, comforting relationship, seeking love, seeking that sense of, we can say, belongingness. So all that can also be considered associated with this given idea of we can say redefining the purpose of marriage, why we are going for marriage. So it is no more associated with a customary necessity, a religious necessity, that then only you will be gaining empowerment. It is something now associated with we can consider bringing people together, creating ease of existence, creating warmth in personal domain. All that can be considered. Higher divorce rates, because because modern India, modern society, when we speak of it, it will be guided by rationality. It will be guided by logic. And when rationality and logic will prevail, you will see the sustainability of relationship in terms of your comfort. If you're comfortable with the person, you continue with the partnership. When the comfort level is getting compromised, you do not feel like sustaining or continuing with the individual. Hence, you can call off the relationship. So when it is a contractual relationship, it is easy to call it off. Hence, the idea of sacramental is somewhere getting negotiated, as all of you can see. Again, another component with respect to marriage, which was very important. The purpose of marriage earlier was associated with procreation, okay, or having children. But nowadays, marriages are not necessarily happening for the sake of procreation. There are DINK families, double income, no kids family. And the double income, no kids families are hyphenating the given possibility that the another samskara, that you have to give birth to a son, and the son shall help you to attain salvation by performing the last rites. That is also something which we all can see is continuously getting compromised. I mean, people are not going for necessarily having a son. Now, When we are speaking of all this, are we thinking of an urban understanding of marriage? Are we talking about the possibility of a cosmopolitan and a metropolitan understanding of marriage? Is marriage like treated as a sacrament in rural India? Well, if I like, because it's general studies answer, not sociology. But still, if you refer to various studies, you will see that separation and divorce is also like reaching rural India. Okay, women in rural India are also becoming aware of their rights and becoming more assertive, though the possibility of continuity of marriage or treating it with a sense of religious sanctity, maintaining and continuation of tradition is still like more profound over there when we are discussing about this given sub-segment. Again, with respect to this term, longer marriages may surprise few people. What does ma'am imply by saying longer marriages? Longer is because of longevity of life. So because people are like surviving for longer years, thus marriages which are able to prove the test of time, they are like able to survive for decades together. So that's also another change in the trend because of medical intervention and other kind of health related interventions, which is bringing in longevity, and with, like I would say, meaningful partnership, people are able to survive their relationship for decades together. So when we are speaking of it, we can see that globalization, and with respect to customs, traditions, and with respect to the kind of impact it is generating for marriage, we can see that globalization is also leading to various types of possibilities or changes per se. You can first and foremost see that globalization will encourage marriage to be treated more with a sense of cultural exchange. So when it will be treated as a cultural exchange, and when you are open to diverse patterns of marriage, there will be blending of cultures. Like, let's say, two different regions, two different religious communities, two different ethnic communities, two different caste-based groups, when are getting married, the possibility of marriage like from a traditional perspective, whereby endogamy or marrying within one's community was followed, that is getting contested. So new patterns of cultural practices will emerge because of it. So that's why inter-ethnic, international marriages. Okay. Again, we can see changing of gender roles, whereby like people are contesting a lot of, we can say, customs and traditions pertaining to marriage. For example, in Bengal, a girl, she like contested the practice of Kanyadan. She said, I'm not a thing to be donated, so I don't want to undergo the practice of Kanyadan. Similarly, in Tamil Nadu, like a couple, especially the girl, she protested against a custom whereby there was a symbolic like gesture being made, whereby the groom had to leave the house. It was symbolic that he's going abroad to avail education and employment, and then he'll be back and getting the bride. And in between, he has to take a vow that he won't leave the bride. Okay. But the truth is that when this custom was about to be started, the bride, she protested. She was like, even I went abroad. I also attained education. So if vows are being exchanged, it should be taken by both. Why only the groom? Okay. So we can see that somewhere the possibility of, we can say, cultural practices, the possibility of customs, the possibility of various types of, we can say, detailed dimensions of ethnicities is also getting contested by the, we can say, modern generation. We can see, again, marriage is facilitated with, we can say, technological and long distance relationship. So technology is also assisting these marriages, especially people who have like higher career, like we can say, aspirations. They are constantly seeking that how we can go ahead with the possibility of marriage, whereby it is like taking care of the given dimension of what we are experiencing in our day-to-day lives, right? Again, further, we can see Economic factors, when we are talking about it, when economy will come into existence, religion will not be the priority, customs will not be a priority. So we can see sometimes people match their class, their economic status. There are reasons pertaining to consumption, okay, whereby, as it is mentioned over here, the consumer culture, the materialistic culture, it also brings people together. So marriage as a sacrament being chosen or being practiced is somewhere like waning. It is fading to exist again. So there are legal and regulatory changes also. Laws are getting amended. Communication and relationship building, we can see that's also undergoing change, whereby we can see that cross-cultural relationships are getting established. And then the traditional marriage ceremonies, with respect to this, sometimes in my sessions, I say so, sometimes in GS, sometimes as optional, that how many of you, especially the younger generation, can sing the songs which your grandmothers or maybe mothers or maybe like old aunts must be singing during the marriage ceremony? Is marriage going to be reduced to Bollywood numbers or Hindi cinema numbers or regional cinema numbers after a couple of years, as the older generation fades to exist? Where are the traditional songs? So when we talk about marriage as a traditional ceremony, bit by bit, the traditional ceremonies are fading off, the practices are fading off, the pattern of remembering those traditions, the systematic order of those traditions, which evolved over the centuries because of our agrarian culture, because of our, we can say, interaction between different communities, that's also undergoing various types of changes when we are talking about it. Okay, so with respect to this, when we are talking about the given dimension, we can further move ahead and we can reflect upon the conclusive aspect associated with it, that globalization is definitely a complex and multifaceted possibility, which is bringing cultures together, regions together. There are various types of changes, positive, negative, okay, and new types of challenges and uncertainties. And definitely it is going to impact the institution of marriage as well, as I discussed about the changes in the institution of marriage as well as notion associated with marriage. So when we are talking about it being sacramental, it was a notion which was associated with Christianity, Catholicism, other religions also, like Hinduism, or we can say Sikhism, Buddhism, Islam. They had a lot of religious, ritualistic customs and traditions. In Hinduism, it is considered as a rites deep passage traditionally, but now all these, we can say, aspects are somewhere undergoing a change, the notional change with respect to the younger generation, how it is treating marriage as an institution across regions. So you can just conclude it by saying that the possibility of uncertainties in the realms of marriage and relationship is happening because of the changing or the challenging notions of sacrament, infallibility or purity, that marriage is infallible, it can never be diluted, or it is pure, larger than life institution. No, we are seeing that all those dimensions are getting changed, and at the same time modern values like rational, productive, humane engagement with one's partner is something which is more and more becoming relevant for the younger generation. Okay, so that's how you try to bring in the balance associated with this given question. All right, then comes the second question. Explain why suicide among young women is increasing in Indian society. First, let us decode the question, because unless you don't make a structure or an approach of an answer, you cannot really attempt the details of the question. So all of you can see, first is explain. So it's not critically analyze whether the statement is correct or not. No, the statement is already, as the question is written, that the statement is believable. You don't have to contest the validity of the statement. You just have to elaborate, substantiate, explain. Okay. And then the component why. Why suicide amongst young women is increasing. Okay, now a lot of students who are sociology optional students, they said, ma'am, can we bring in Durkheim and the concept of integration? And when we are talking about the very possibility of Durkheim, can we quote him? Well, no, not really. When I'm talking about social integration and social regulation of Durkheim, please refrain from taking the name. If you're bringing in this as an introduction, that suicide is a psychological, private issue as well as a social byproduct of a society which is experiencing rigors or challenges associated with social integration and regulation, it will be accepted. Do not take Durkheim's name. You can pick some technical words and generalize it. And that's how you have to attempt general studies paper. This is for sociology students, so that your sociological wisdom is also put to action without sounding too expert. Because if you sound expert in sociology, I mean, social issues, think about the expertise if geography optional student brings in geography GS, or economics optional student brings that expertise in economics answers related to GS. I mean, that's unwarranted. Okay. So you don't have to quote Durkheim, but yes, you can, if you want to talk about social regulation, social integration, they can be used as regular words, profound words. And anyway, these terms are there in NCERT, okay, standard 11th. So you can bring in that wisdom with a mellow temperament without taking the name of the thinker, so that the general of general studies is remain intact. All right. So with respect to this, when we are reflecting upon this given answer, so first and foremost, when we are talking about suicide amongst women, so I'll directly address the issue of women, young women, okay? And we can see that it will be something which is not, we can say perennial a problem. It is not uniform a problem. You can say that it can be associated with, like, we can consider particular regions or particular social situations. We can say backgrounds in which the perceptibility or the possibility of a person performing suicide can be higher. All right. So here we can see that they face significant challenges, including gender-based violence, discrimination, which can contribute to higher rates of suicide among women. Now, what are the reasons? I have enlisted them, like, as you can see, arranged marriages. When we are talking about this problem of arranged marriage, now, arranged marriage per se is not a problem. You can choose your partner through any means, by your own choice, your parents choosing one for you. That's perfectly fine. The issue is the pressure, the psychological pressure, the expectations, okay? There can be emotional distress associated with it. When you are like getting into, I'm so sorry, it's because of, just a second. Akhileshji, why is this, is it fine now? Yeah, okay. Now, so when we are talking about this given possibility of, like, let's say arranged marriages, we all need to understand that arranged marriage is not a problem per se. The problem is our notion associated with the institution of marriage. So if I'm talking about like, let's say, a lot of pressure on the partner with respect to look in a specific way, dress up in a specific way, like, you know, present herself in a specific way, and the girl is unable to take in the pressure of adjustment and adaptation and conforming to the rules, regulations, expectations from her beyond the limit, there can be a possibility that, like, as you might be remembering, fatalistic suicide. Yeah, all of you, types of suicide. Sociology students. So in fatalistic suicide, you can think of this given possibility that a person may feel that there is no way out and I'm not finding any alternative out of this situation. And probably this is what my destiny is all about. And if my destiny is all about this and I'm unable to cope up with the stress, few women may, especially younger women, because there can be lack of socialization, hand-holding, counseling, that comfort space, because of which they may attempt suicide when we speak of it. Again, when we are discussing about this given subsegment, we can further reflect upon the dimension of domestic violence. A lot of like girls may suffer from domestic violence, because of which there can be a sense of hopelessness and despair, which can lead to the problem. Dowry related issues, we can reflect upon it related to, we can say, dowry demands, harassment. Okay, it can be causing emotional trauma for younger girls, especially when they are seeing that their parents are suffering because of that. So few girls may think of the given possibility of, like, let's say, committing suicide That's like, neither I will be alive nor my parents will suffer because of that reason. So that can be a reason related to it. We can see gender discrimination of any form, which is too severe in nature, which leads to feeling of powerlessness and depression. So that also can be incorporated. So I hope sociology students can see that how types of suicide can also be brought in over here without necessarily taking Durkheim's name, once in a while borrowing a point or two from there, and at the same time reflecting about the generalized reasons. Remember violence against women, sociology paper 2. So violence against women, you can extract points from there. That's what I did, extracting points from there and then blending it with reasons of suicide. That's how you need to exercise smartness. Okay, so bring in reasons of violence, types of violence, and how which reason can lead to a suicide. That's how. Okay, social isolation. So a lot of women can experience this because of strict cultural practices. Don't meet this, don't do this. So that can lead to loneliness, depression, and in severe cases, it can also lead to the step which is not appreciated or which is not to be supported in any case. Such people need a lot of counseling, hand holding, and formal counseling in many cases. Again, we can see there can be economic vulnerability, and economic vulnerability is also which is trapping a person in a given situation where the person is unable to meet the basic needs and necessities of life, dignity of life, able to uphold one's self-respect and identity. So that can be discussed. Media influence is not a massive reason, but yes, it has been observed across the world that whenever a celebrity or we can say any popular trend is going on, it can also influence the youngsters. So if any celebrity dies, like for example, one of my students was sharing that, ma'am, when Sushant Singh Rajput died, one of my classmates, she was an ardent fan, she died. Well, similarly, when we can see when Jayalalitha, she died, at that time also a lot of her followers committed suicide. Okay, so when we talk about media influence here, what I imply to say is like if someone is heavily influenced by some figure, and young people, younger generation, men and women both, they are spending quality time on internet, and this illusionary world is shaping their idea of real world. And if there is any massive disturbance in their illusionary world, where their worldview gets undergoes some kind of turbulence, whereby there is normlessness, what is right, what is wrong, that is compromised, the person may commit suicide. That's something which all of you can connect with. Again, we can consider this for social isolation, heavy regulation and integration. Yes, you can think of like heavy regulation and integration leading to social isolation. That's how you can, through cultural practices leading to isolation. Like that is how you can use it, Shrisht. Okay. Now, with respect to this given subsegment, we can further talk about like access to legal means. See, I have kept it as one of the lower points, like, to not just the last point, because last point also should be significant enough, but somewhere towards the lower side. Why? Because in rural areas, if you see the trend of committing suicide, women have access to rat poison and various other local, we can say, interventions, which can be consumed and which can cause death. So it was observed that because of access to pesticides or rat poison, it also encouraged, or even access to kerosene that a person could just spread on oneself and then person could douse into fire. So that was also found that was also leading to suicide. Like we can say potential aids, or we can say tools which are around you and you're already undergoing the mental distress. So lack of mental health services, whereby trained professionals, especially in rural areas, when that is not reaching out. Mental health stigma, people are not comfortable, or I would say they don't have the maturity to accept that people may suffer from mental health. It is important for us to respect this given possibility that someone may be suffering from mental health, and you need to just respect the person, to let the person be, rather than judge the person or question the person. But yes, at the same time, never ever encourage the person to talk or to think in that direction. Because when you encourage the person to talk and think in that direction, that can also, like, feed the fire. Okay, so here, and you should not try to become a counselor if you're not a trained one. Okay, regular counseling, regular love, regular engagement is fine, but there is something much more that is required. That comes from trained help. It comes through medicines, it can come through meaningful counseling, it can come through altering one's pattern of thought and behavior, all of it. Okay, so mental health stigma is a massive issue in India, and we have like negative social attitude towards it to a certain extent, not majorly, but to a certain extent. Academic pressure can also impact a girl to commit suicide, whereby she feels that disappointing the family expectations is something which is uncalled for, because, like, her education is not something which is individualistic. Her education is symbolic for education of all the girls in her region, in her extended family, if she is an elder one, okay, in her village, okay, in her vicinity. So she becomes a symbolic, we can say, baron of education, okay, bastion of education. So when she is the bastion of education and she is unable to cope up with the pressures of education, there can be a possibility that she may contemplate suicide. Okay, there can be cultural factors also related to family honor or shame, which can also encourage the woman to commit suicide. That's what we all can consider. After mentioning all of it, then you can discuss about the given conclusion related to this question, whereby you can talk about what we need. So a brief overview related to the component of suggestions. That's what is encouraged to all of you, that just give a brief insight related to suggestions, and that's how you can wrap up the answer. You can just, like, I would say, bring a contextual understanding or logic to the answer. All right. Further ahead, when we are moving with this given dimension, we can reflect upon the next question. That is, child cuddling is now being replaced by mobile phones. Discuss its impact on socialization of children. Now, what happens is that when students see such kind of, we can consider, whenever students see this kind of dimension, we can understand that students have a sense of understanding while seeing these questions, that, oh, it is so generalized in nature. UPSC has this tendency, for more than a decade now. I remember there was a question in 2010, which was related to changing patterns of nutrition for children due to globalization. So many people thought, oh, it's about pizza, burger. So you cannot generalize it like that. There's a way to decode such questions which look too simplistic and generalized in nature, but they have to, segmented into certain brackets. So first and foremost, you can see this is saying child cuddling is now being replaced by mobile phones. Many people would superficially decode it that child cuddling is now being replaced by mobile phones. They can say, oh, child cuddling can be replaced by children also when they are resorting to online, watching games, animations, etc. And child cuddling can be replaced by adults also. People may decode it both ways. Please pay attention to the language. Child cuddling is now being replaced by mobile phones. Now being replaced. The question is by whom? Who will be replacing it? By whom? So cuddling is done by whom? Okay, the mother or the parent, right? So is now being replaced by mobile phones. Okay, so by whom? For whom? When you raise these kind of questions and discuss its impact on socialization of children. Okay, so you can see there are layers to this question as well. So first is, who is replacing child cuddling with mobile phone and why? So why are adults not cuddling the child enough? Is it due to fun? Is it due to being lazy or easy with the child? Or is it also associated with some necessity? Because that's the profound way you are supposed to analyze a question. You are not supposed to engage with a question when we are discussing a given question from one-sided opinion. Okay, so it will be very superficial to say that, oh, parents have become so laid back. Parents are no more good at parenting. They have done away with traditional ways of hugging and cuddling a child. I mean, that will be a very superficial take too. The thing is, why is mobile phone a necessity? And then talking about why child cuddling is important. And when it is missing, then what are the segments which will get affected? Then what will be the short-term implication and what will be the long-term implication? Both. Okay, so that's how you're supposed to segmentalize it. Okay, like let us reflect upon the answer, what I have created for all of you. So as all of you can see, first and foremost, parents, especially mothers, like many individuals, may use phone for various reasons. This is a balanced way to write. Okay, may use the phones for various reasons. There can be various reasons. So communication with family and friends, which is also equally important and essential. For information, for support, maybe for child rearing practices only, for handling the baby well, what kind of nutritional supplement should be given to the child. Multiple reasons you may use a phone because it is the easiest and fastest source of information. Okay, again, we can see work and productivity, especially for mothers or parents who are working from home, right? It can be related to social media, entertainment, right? Shopping and errands, because there are times when mothers are ordering a lot of things online, a lot of support system getting created from online. Okay, a lot of social media channels talking about how to take care of the baby, or YouTube channels instructing you with respect to how to handle the nappy or how to give the massage and so many other things, which traditionally was taken care of by the extended family, the neighborhood. The child did not belong to the isolated or the nuclear family only. The child belonged to the entire neighborhood, not only the joint family. So think about it. Okay, coping mechanisms to deal with stress or feeling of isolation. So there can be mothers or parents who are in a distress situation, and for the sake of entertainment or for the sake of, we can say, meaningful positive distraction, we can see that once in a while, just to cheer themselves up, they might be resorting to social media, because social media can cheer you up instantly with certain posts, certain kind of witty, like we can say, sources, right? So that's also something which we all can connect with. Now further, let us understand this given dimension. So it's important for parents and caregivers to strike a balance between using these digital devices for various purposes while spending quality time with younger ones, as their wholesome personality development takes place at this stage. And one of the profound ways to connect with a child is through cuddling, as it has tremendous impact on the emotional and psychological well-being of the child, right? So here, let us see what kind of impact cuddling creates. Just the keywords I'll be showing. You can read the details later. So you can see there is an emotional bonding that gets created through cuddling, because there's a sense of well-being. In ethics paper, we talk about contact comfort studies. Okay, here I'm just helping you to recall that. So in contact comfort studies, it was observed even amongst monkeys that the monkeys who were not orphaned, who are taken care of by their mothers, those monkeys, when they grew up, they had better personalities. They could maintain a better balance with the opposite gender. They were able to maintain leadership roles in their own group. They were able to share better, communicate better. Okay, whereas those monkeys who were orphaned were either too quarrelsome or too timid and detached from the community, from the group. Okay, so that was contact comfort studies. The same results were again observed amongst orphan children. It was observed that children who were hugged and cuddled by their mothers exercised better personalities. They could handle emotional distress better. They were able to communicate their discomfort better. They were able to, in future, when they grew up, they had better relation with their partners. They were able to communicate better with the society. So contact comfort studies can also be recalled. Okay, but because of 150 word limitation, I just picked up the insights of contact comfort studies and I just am bringing it over here. So we can see this. So because of hugging or cuddling, what do we see? There is stress reduction that takes place because there's oxytocin that is released. We can see emotional regulation can take place because a child learns how to regulate one's emotion. Okay, there is a very soothing kind of dimension, soothing possibility which takes place when a child is suffering a distress situation. A child tends to feel secure. Okay, again, we can see there is brain development. It has been proved scientifically, especially for infants, that hugging and cuddling also encourages better brain development because growth related hormones are released. Okay, again, communication, because when parents are cuddling a child, they will talk also. And when they are frequently talking to the child, language formation, like sentence formation, grammatical understanding, right? And emotional articulation of one's emotion takes place, okay, through communication. So, and all that happens when we are continuously in the process of, we can consider, continuously in the process of, we can say, cuddling a child, okay? So all these key points. Further, when we move ahead, we can see there is this social skills that you can generate in a child with respect to understanding the physical boundaries, what ought to be we can consider exercised at all times and what ought not to be reflected upon, right? Again, further, we can talk about, right. So with respect to this parent and child traded in digital, Rita, how can we mold empathetic human if we replace nurturing touch with screens? Yes, that's there. This language can be used, but more over in essay. Okay, this can be still, it is acceptable if you're using it in introduction or conclusion for that matter. Okay, so you can just towards the big end, what probably I thought of incorporating is, in the long run, when this absence of this cuddling is there, then in what ways it can impact the child. So there will be a limited perspective of the child as the child grows up, because when you are having a sense of security and comfort, you're open to embrace diversity. When you're not feeling secure, you will be resistance to difference, resistance to diversity, because you will see it as a threat. When you're psychologically feeling comfortable, warm, the sense of being held, the sense of belongingness, okay, that also broadens your perspective as a grown-up. Okay, reflect what I said. This is a very deep sentence which I said. Now, so it can also encourage lack of empathy, because if diversity is missing, it is due to lack of empathy. Social skills can be also experiencing deficit in social skills. Further, we can see value formation and identity development. That's also something which can be reflected. So value formation and identity development can be compromised. We can further see mental health impact can also be observed, right? Whereby a child is experiencing that loneliness, anxiety, depression. When you are cuddling a child and then you are talking a lot, and generally what do we talk to a child other than games, plays, pulling the leg? We also talk about a lot of do's and don'ts. And through those do's and don'ts, we communicate a lot of values to a child. A child who's experiencing insecurity at a younger age, I can give you this example from ISIS. ISIS, what you know, how it behaves with children, it will pick the child at a younger age, preferably less than 5 years of age. Separate a child from the mother. And then they will regiment the child about, we can say, the possibility of sensitization. How will they regiment the child? So sometimes it has been observed, they give a child a pet. The child will be raising a pet. And as the child is gaining a sense of connect with the pet, one day they will just take the pet and kill the pet in front of the child. The child has a lot of anger, a lot of resistance, a lot of hatred. And then they will repeat this phenomenon by and by with other children in the surroundings, and they'll keep giving pet, again this. Over the time period, a sense of emotional detachment, anger, resistance is what is bred in the child. Okay, and because of which it becomes very easy for them to inject radicalized ideas that what we say is right. Any kind of empathy, sensitization, which or sensitivity which is emerging from within you it is not a right choice, because like your emotions are not guided correctly. It is we who will say when you should become emotional and when you should not, which issues you should be passionate about, which you should not. So that's what. When warmth is missing, when the cuddle of the mother is missing, when sense of security is missing, it can, and insecurity is prevailing, all that can also lead to like risk the possibility of radicalization. So radicals will always prefer that a child who's not had a very comfortable childhood, who has not been like loved or protected enough, they will try to handle or identify such a child per se. Okay. Then further, when we are speaking of it, we can also reflect upon certain other subsegments that is related to delayed language development. I told you, if you're not talking regularly to the child, this will happen. Attention issues, behavioral issues, when the child is like, not getting enough attention, cuddling, then you will see the child will become more agitated, angry, attention seeker, will try to throw a tantrum, like, relationship regulation, behavior management, all that can go topsy-turvy. Again, inconsistent discipline. Sometimes the child is like being all nice. Sometimes the child is becoming too rude or arrogant, all those possibilities. There can be sleep disturbances, because if you're using a lot of mobile phone and your child is also exposed to that screen space, okay, then in that situation, the mother as well as the child, both, or the parent as well as the child, both may experience this disturbance in the sleep cycle. Again, there can be reduced attention and interaction. That's also something which we can see. So, however, it's important to note that impact of cuddling can vary from child to child. That's also an important angle to be opened in the conclusion. Not every child needs too much of hugging, and not every child is comfortable hugging. Children have a tendency, like, when they're really secure, then few children will have a tendency to be very assertive. And the moment you try to hug the child, no, 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 just take me down. I want to walk. I want to play. I want to run. I want to do things myself. Yes, that child is quite secure. That's why now the child is trying to seek his or her space. So it's not necessary you always cuddle the child. Okay, you need to respect the personality of the child, because different children will need different levels of cuddling, different levels of being supported. Okay, so you need to respect that. Cuddling is generally beneficial, okay, but it should be in a way that it is respecting a child's comfort and autonomy. Okay, and we need to understand that children may naturally need more physical affection, okay, but still at the same time, many may also respect their independence and may seek independence. So the key is to establish what? A nurturing and response caregiving environment. Okay, what is this cuddling? Cuddling is associated with this. This is the core essence of cuddling. That's the key issue, and with which I would like to end the answer. That the key is to establish what? A nurturing, because by cuddling, we wanted to create what? A nurturing and a responsible, okay, so responsive caregiving environment that meets the unique needs of each child. Okay, I hope all of you are able to understand this answer as well. Then we move to this one. How did the colonial rule affect the tribals in India, and what was the tribal response to colonial oppression? Now, with respect to this question, I believe all the sociology students, old as well as new, the present batch yet needs to study this chapter. But this is the notes which is related to tribals in India. And in these notes, as I believe all of you can see, there is this colonial policy and tribes. That's something which is an integral part of the syllabus in sociology. Those students who don't have sociology optional, see, the moment they see this kind of question, see this specific question, how did the colonial rule affect the tribals in India? And what was the tribal response to the colonial oppression? Right? You can see this. Two aspects of the question, two parts of the question. In this given segment, when we are reflecting upon the answer related to it, what is expected from all of you? Because see, like history, because it looks like a history-oriented question, and it is, beyond doubt it is. The thing is, in history classes, you don't get an exclusive lecture on tribals. Tribals rather is taught very exhaustively in the component of, we can say, Indian society. So whether you are dealing with Indian society, the notes, the material, or you are dealing with, suppose you have studied social issues from some other teacher somewhere else, no problem. You reach out to your sociology optional friends and tell them that give me the brief notes related to tribals in India. I need that material. I know that it's helpful. In that, you will find various subsegments associated with tribals. One of the subsegments is associated with colonial. And I believe that majority of the subsegments are raised in GS. If you want to have an overview, what are the sub-dimensions which are there in the syllabus of sociology and how it is connected to GS, there is this brief dimension. Definitional problems, this area definitional problems has been asked so many number of times. I mean, if I say at least 3 times directly, once indirectly, like, so 3 times directly, this question being asked, definitional problems, the problem to identify tribes, why tribals are referred as ST. I'm talking about GS, not sociology optional. In GS, thrice questions have been asked related to the component of definitional problem. Geographical spread has not been asked even once. Okay, the component of marginalization of tribals post-independence has again been being asked. So tribals as oppressed or marginal community, issues of integration and autonomy. Yes, this has been asked twice. And when we are talking about colonial policy and tribals, this has been asked this time, 2023. For the first time, this area which was associated with history, but it is a part of sociology syllabus. It was asked directly. Why? Who's making the question paper? A university professor. And the university professor who is making the question paper for sociology optional is the same person who is making the question for Indian society, proposing a list of questions to the, we can say, the chief invigilator, and the chief invigilator is picking questions from all the, we can say, suggestion sources, all academicians giving their questions, blending them, and then presenting a wholesome question paper for the civil services aspirants. So you can see it's directly in sociology syllabus, and thus you can lift the content from here. So I'll directly take you to this colonial policy and tribals, and then we'll start with the discussion. So in this, when the question is asking 2 parts, how did colonial rule affect the tribals? And then what is their response to that impact, what colonial oppression was doing to them? So you can directly see what, like when we are talking about it, you can do away with the, this who is speaking what. So in GS, you don't need to talk about this. What is GS Ghuriye saying? What is Verrier Elvin saying? It's not that if you write, marks will be deducted. No, not really. Is it something exclusive to sociology option? No, not really, because these statements can be found even in basic NCR. Okay, whereby, because Verrier Elvin was a part of Nehru's team as well. Okay, before independence in 1920s, he had discussed the approach to empower the tribals to the British, because the British had invited him. Post-independence, Jawaharlal Nehru invited him that you have stayed with tribals, because he initially came for evangelical purposes for a few years, and then after 3 or 4 years only, he underwent a change in his, I would say, intellect and in his heart, and he did not want to continue with evangelical purposes, and he wanted to stay with tribals, do studies on them, write books and research papers related to it. So Verrier Elvin, he also got married initially to a Gond woman, underwent a divorce within a time span of 7 or 8 years. And then again, second marriage was also related to another tribal woman from Odisha. Okay, so Verrier Elvin, it was considered he has a very good and thorough understanding of tribals in India with non-participatory observation. Okay, so maintaining that sense of neutrality despite being a part of the community. And that's why his research work and his writings are highly honored. And that's why you have him over here. So when we are reflecting upon Verrier Elvin or GS Ghuriye, you can just discuss their insight also if you want to. But anyway, when we are speaking of it, you can start straight away from here also, that in 1855, various committees and policies were made in which Lord Dalhousie announced the first forest policy, in which timber was declared as the property of the state and its cutting was a criminal offense. So of course, like all the tribals who are associated with minor forest produce, or we can say the wood the non-timber forest produce, all of them will be segmentalized. They will be segregated and they will not be allowed to use those resources further. Right. So what do we see? We all can see that gradually with the establishment of British rule, we can see there is the phase of invasion and appropriation. So this is a technical term used by one of the thinkers, but you can see here also I've not mentioned the thinker later. Later in the sociology notes, I've mentioned his name in this material only. But in GS, you don't need to mention the name of thinker at all. You just need to talk about how this invasion and appropriation was carried forward by the British. Points have been enlisted, which all of you can see. It is through railways and roadways, by which new system of administration came into existence, which challenged the tribal way of life, the tribal methods of regulation and administration. You can talk about political autonomy of tribals. It was like lost. We can also see there was plunder of natural resources. There is displacement and confrontation with tribals, because of which we all can see that tribal autonomy was contested, and a lot of, we can say, tribal protests took place in different parts of, we can say, India. Then the Britishers, they declared forest, when we are able to see that they declared forest as a national asset. And when they are declaring it as a national asset, we can see that it is something which is going to regulate the forest products and produce. Further, we can see in tribal regions, like the land was never owned like privately. We could see there was jhum cultivation or shifting cultivation. So tribals, they always had a community ownership to the land. And that's something which can be connected in this given scenario. Okay, that that given possibility of, like, tribals holding the land, tribals taking care of the given land, is something which can be associated with the dimension of like, we can say, British challenging that authority, and they like removing the tribals from that specific land, and that leading to that we can say unrest because of the displacement. So because you can talk about the institution of private property was introduced by the British. Comprador class, which is the zamindars. Okay, you can talk about these zamindars, how they collaborated with the British to further go ahead with exploitation of land. Again, you can talk about ownership rights. They were vested in these traditional elites, that is the zamindars. And we can further see that tribal counties were created, which were very attractive for people from outside. And they considered that if we move to the tribal regions, it will be like very lucrative for all of us to, we can consider, monetize the situation, to profiteer from the given situation. Further, we all can see that there's land hunger is increasing. So, like, they started like selling cheap liquor and all that to the tribals to confiscate the land. That's why Verrier Elvin said, when the Britishers asked that what should be done to contain tribal unrest, because there's a massive tribal unrest between, you can see, like 1889 or 1885 onwards, we can say, but majorly 1889 to 1906. Okay, major unrests like in different parts of India, right? And Birsa Munda, if you can remember, Tana Bhagat. So all these like social movements, you can simultaneously recall, and you can keep like writing all that as an impact that was also happening simultaneously. Okay, so that's the reason why the British, they started reflecting that what kind of policy is required, because of which we can do away with the social unrest that is caused by the tribals. Okay. Anyway, you can talk about monetization of market economy. So because of monetization of market economy, private brewing of liquor was considered illegal, and tribals were in the habit of like having their own locally brewed liquor and consuming that regularly, because tribals are associated to a certain extent with hedonistic lifestyle. What is hedonistic? Eat, drink, make merry, have a comfortable, easy life, simple life, but like, a fulfilling life, like that. Fulfilling in terms of, we can say, physical condition. Okay, not materialistic condition, because you're not into hoarding of property, but, like we can say, a condition of existence. So that's what we all can associate with. Again, we can see, so liquor drinking, an integral part of tribal life, and that was something which was no more possible because you could not brew it at home. So you get into the possibility of, we can say, like borrowing money to purchase liquor, and that will lead to indebtedness. There's failure of rain, drought, famine, all these natural calamities that will further add to the misery. You will again go to money lenders for the money, and that will further increase the misery. There's land alienation, which has led to millions of tribals getting isolated, especially from Bengal, Chota Nagpur region of Jharkhand, Bengal, parts of like northern Odisha. You can also see Santhals. Santhals from West Bengal were we can see picked from the Santhal Pargana and also from Jharkhand, and they were sent to Assam in the tea estates. So there was also like dislocation that took place. So marginalization and pauperization and loss of tribal autonomy. These are some core impacts when we reflect upon it. So Santhal rebellion was a mark of this disenchantment when we talk about it. Okay, so when we are talking about this, we can also see British, they did not study the customs, the practices, the lifestyle of tribals, and then they drafted a policy because of which they said that if you have the land record, you shall be given the right of ownership. If you don't have land record, then you cannot use the land. And tribals traditionally were into shifting cultivation, so they were dissociated from the land. And that is something which you all can recall will also lead to the friction per se. Again, B.D. Sharma, he reports how the forest officials, they used to interpret laws in a very ridiculous manner, and because of which we can see the tribals were further marginalized, and that also led to an unsympathetic attitude of the forest officers. So all this, it led to like tribal unrest and friction. So we can see when they lost their control, which is also referred as Jad, Jungle, Zameen. Jad means your roots, jungle means the forest, and Zameen means the land, which they were like cultivating as a consolidated community. So all those possibilities could be visible in this given situation, right? And because of which we can see the economic resources of their livelihood was getting compromised. All right. Further, we can see they became a part of the larger political unit, and hence they lost their political autonomy. And they started resisting this given possibility. Other issues you can see is related to, we can say, multiple types of, we can say, cultural aggression, also impact of, we can say, conversion. So all those things were also happening. Then what is the impact of it? That is the second part of it. So what is the impact due to it? If you notice the question, so the question asks is, what was the tribal response to colonial oppression? So in tribal response, you can just notice all these different types of revolts. Okay, enlist few revolts, the important ones. Okay, after that, you can also talk about the tribal response. Because of all this, the revolts and rebellion was also happening. Certain, we can consider tribal communities, they preferred to remain in isolation. Some became a part of the mainstream society with cultural contact, and sometimes also because of, we can say, conversion. Okay, so conversion, cultural contact, so assimilation, accepting caste names, accepting caste identities, those were also the responses, other than the revolts and rebellions. Okay, so other than revolts and rebellions, when we speak of it, you can talk about, we can say, plus. Okay, along with revolts and rebellions, you can talk about assimilation. Assimilation, what happens in assimilation? You tend to become similar, okay, to the mainstream community. So assimilation, when you accept, we can consider the mainstream occupation. So let's say becoming a part of the caste system. Okay. Another response which we can see is many of them started converting. So conversion, because of the ease of existence that was offered in the form of jobs or healthcare or education, means basic facilities which in general should have been extended to the tribal community by the state. Because it was not being extended, and for a comfortable living, a new ideology or thought process was introduced in the form of religion, and simultaneously it was encouraged to go for, like, let's say, conversion. So it became, we can consider, acceptable. Again, further, when we are speaking of it, we all can connect it with, we can say, the segment of like the impact of tribals. We can say there was also social integration. So there was also integration, whereby they maintained their identity, but at the same time, they started catching up with the mainstream customs, traditions, economic behavior, economic association. So all that can also be associated over here. All right. I hope this is making sense to all of you. And along with that, multiple problems like related to this given phenomena can be enlisted, and then suggested that that's the reason why post-independence, Nehru, understanding this conflict and this isolation, came up with the policy of integration. Like that, you can just cover it. All right. So this policy of isolation, which Britishers came up with, that was creating a tribal zoo-like possibility, and policy of integration, which was post-independence. These were two responses by the government, pre-independence and post-independence. That can be briefly enlisted in one sentence, because that's not the core demand of the question. The question is tribal response. So first is the effect on tribals, and second is tribal response. So that's how you're supposed to like move ahead with the question. Then, why did human development fail to keep pace with economic development in India? Right? Now, human development, okay, with respect to economic development, and then failed to keep pace. Right? Why? Why it failed? So first and foremost, we need to understand what is human development. Okay. After understanding what is human development, we need to tally it with how human development and economic development may not be one and the same, may not be one and the same. Then you have to discuss the reasons of, we can consider, lack of similarity. So reasons of or reasons responsible for the gap. So I hope all of you are understanding how questions are decoded, because it's very important for all of you to understand how to decode the question and like, substantiate the given answer. Okay. So like reasons for the gap, right? The reasons for the gap. And that's how you would be like substantiating the answer qualitatively. So first and foremost, we can see that India, when we are speaking of human development, it is like associated with this component of human development is associated with segments related to health, education, standard of living, right? Acha, with respect to human development, are you aware of the three values of human development? Because we are discussing that why human development failed to keep pace with economic development. Here, values of human development is not required. That's why I'm not discussing it here. But in general, like you students should know the three values of human development. And in another question, if wherever there is a reflection related to human development, you can bring in that wisdom. Golet, a thinker, had given this concept related to human development, which was later on adopted by the World Bank in 1960s. He said human development can be associated with three segments, three parameters. First, the basic essentials of life. What are the basic essentials of life? That can be associated with health, education. Now you'll be like, oh, this is something which I knew. Yes, definitely you did. So health, education, then a very important segment, security. Yes, security. So health, education, security. And after security, you can talk about other essentials related to sanitation, or we can say housing. Okay. And then, so that's first thing, the basic essentials of life. Second segment is related to self-respect and self-esteem. Okay. It's not necessary that if you are getting food, shelter, clothing, self-respect and self-esteem is protected. Ask those women who have been married or who have been raised by their parents, but they are constantly victims of abuse just because of their gender identity. So just because they are getting food or shelter or clothing, it does not mean their self-respect and identity is preserved. Okay. So there can be women who are working. You'll be like, oh, if a woman is economically independent, she'll be fine. No, no, no. There can be a possibility a woman can be economically independent, but her salary is getting controlled by her husband or her parent or her brother. Okay, anyone. So in that situation also, we can see this possibility can be compromised. So when we are talking about values of human development, first is basic needs and necessities in life. Second can be associated with self-respect and self-esteem. And third can be associated with choice. Okay, freedom of choice. When you're exposed to a lot of choices and your skill development is multifaceted, and then you can choose what you want to become, what you want to do. That is something associated with the component of freedom of choice. All right. I hope all of you are able to understand this given subsegment, right? Again, when we are further reflecting upon this given dimension, we all can reflect upon these segments, challenges of human development, how these challenges of human development is happening, then connected to the segment of economy, right? So here, when we are reflecting upon the subdimension, first and foremost, you can think of income inequality, that is inequality in wages. And that's too tremendous in India. I mean, the lesser I speak, the better it is. So we all can see that individuals, we can see that they are struggling with this given possibility. Sanskritization, where do you want to fit it, the idea of Sanskritization, Vasav? If you're thinking that you will talk about Sanskritization of tribals, well. That will be an improper usage, because if you actually sociologically get into the segment of Sanskritization took place of middle rung castes, not lower rung communities, whether it was related to the Dalits, it was related to the untouchables, it was associated with tribal groups. If you imply to say that tribals, I'm sorry to the rest of the students, because I told you I'll be taking doubts also in between. So if you imply to say that Sanskritization of tribals took place, well, not really. It was not Sanskritization per se. I had mentioned this term that tribals took up caste identities. Okay, tribals had taken up, not here, just a second, not here. I had mentioned it over here. The tribals had taken up caste identities. Okay, so when I said they took up the caste identities, it is different from Sanskritization, because taking up caste identity, majority of the tribals were provided with a lower caste identity, not a higher caste identity. You think of Dhokra Kamar, you think of Pentia Bhoi, you think of Gaddi Lohar, you can think of the Hira Potters. You can see the kind of caste groups they get associated with. There has been, in ancient times, there has been a mention of, we can consider Santhal Raj, Gond Raj, but are they consolidated into the component of Kshatriya community? Think. So the idea of Sanskritization, Vasav, Ayush, from wherever you are taking that up, let me share this with you, that the idea of Sanskritization pertaining to tribals cannot be really associated. It cannot really be associated. The term will not fall in the correct place with respect to majority of the tribals, even those communities which came close to caste groups and adopted or they accepted caste-based identities. Sanskritization is not the right term. Any thorough academician who understands the term Sanskritization will not use the term. Okay, we'll say that yes, caste-based identities were accepted by tribes, but that's not what is Sanskritization per se. Okay. Now, with respect to it, and that too, if I'm talking about it from M.N. Srinivasa's concept associated with Sanskritization. Okay, Sanskritization is like when a community, it emulates or it copies the, we can say, cultural identity or the cultural behavior of upper caste communities, like vegetarianism, like taking bath twice a day, like chanting or like reading scriptures, right? Getting into we can say those forms of day-to-day life activities which are considered as sacred, right, or pure. Now, the thing is, you know about Sanskritization, there is a clause that when you are copying a upper caste community, and generally Brahmins, because initially there was a term Brahminization used instead of Sanskritization, okay, which was later on by Srinivas only removed. It was replaced, Brahminization was replaced with Sanskritization. But we can see that the term, when we are talking about Sanskritization, it was associated with acceptance of the community, the dominant community and the upper caste community of the region. Then only a community would be considered as Sanskritized. Like we can see, yes, do you people know, or students of the old students, do you remember the community which was associated with it? Vishwakarma Brahmins, remember? So Vishwakarma Brahmins, they aspired to be recognized as Brahmins, but the larger community did not accept them as Brahmins. So they failed to be recognized as Brahmins. So Sanskritization is not complete till the time the other communities also accept you as an upper caste group. Okay, that's why Vasav, having a thorough understanding is very essential. You cannot just use terms like casual, and it applies to us also. We teachers, we also should refrain from using sociological terms casually. Okay, we have to be very clear about first the in-depth understanding of the word, the meaning of it, and then the correct usage of it. If we are throwing those words casually, that can be problematic, especially greater responsibility when you are teaching GS. First, how much the word should be exercised, how far the language can be exercised, one. And second, if you're exercising that language, how it should not overwhelm a child, how it should be in a balanced precision when we are speaking of it. I hope you're getting an idea of it because it's general studies. So, okay, I will look into this. Vikash, thank you for the suggestion. All right, political mismanagement, a failure of investment in education, healthcare, the development. Yes, 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 very good. That can be considered, all those points. Now, so with respect to this given area, the next question that we had started with, okay. So the question that why human development fail to keep pace with economic development in India. So I first shared the approach with all of you, how to decode the question in in an open mode and how we can incorporate the segments per se. So here, as we are reflecting upon this given dimension, first and foremost, you need to explain very briefly what is human development, and then what is economic development, and how human development may not lead to or may not be associated with economic development. A society can get economically developed, but not developed from the perspective of human development. Okay, so and what are the reasons responsible for the gap? Actual focus should be on the reasons responsible for the gap. So briefly speaking, when we speak of human development, it is related to three core components: health, education, standard of living. Then you are supposed to reflect from these key points. I mean, I think this is effortless thinking. So income inequality. One more thing with respect to you students. What happens is when we see these points, you're like, yeah, I know it. When it comes to reflecting and writing, the biggest gap which I have seen related to these points is knowing the point is very different from being able to create it. So what probably I can advise all of you is, how about you memorizing the list of points? I mean, seeing the point and knowing it is different. You'll be like, yeah, I'm understanding. But if I ask you to reproduce, maybe you can write 4 or 5 dimensions. How many of you can exactly produce each and every single dimension? Think about it. You'll be skipping few. Reflect which one. Okay, reflect which one. And then understand that memorizing a structure is always helpful. There is no shortcut to it. So try to memorize structures of answers. The moment you get a question, you're recalling the structure and you're writing. That increases speed, that increases memory. Okay, now, so this economic inequality, that everyone is understanding, like that is associated with wages and why or salary, why this difference will be there? Because you don't have quality education, so you don't have sufficient skills. When you don't have sufficient skills, then you can be unemployed, underemployed, or even if you are employed, you are getting poor salary because of poor skills. Then it can lead to health related disparities. Health related disparities can be preventive as well as curative. So preventive, like for example, you don't have sufficient access to nutrition, food security. Preventive, you don't have access to a sanitized environment to stay, access to clean water. Okay. And curative, you're falling ill, but you don't have access to medicines. Again, gender inequality. So we can say inequality pertaining to identity can also be another problem. Then we can see child labor can be an issue associated with the same. Environmental degradation. Poor people, they live in unhealthy environments, they fall ill, and as they fall ill, we all can see that the given possibility of they falling ill impacts the very dimension of their performance at work, participation at work. So that's also something which we all can connect with. Further, when we are discussing about this given dimension, we can also connect it with, like, let's say, the component of like population growth. So poor people, they will, we have like discussed that in the GS class with many of you. Those who have not attended, it's okay. The point of theory of wealth model, poor people will have a tendency to produce more children so that more supportive hands, earning hands at a very young age or at a very early stage, a child may switch to like a different employment opportunities. You can see like the boys who start selling vegetables, or the children who start selling momos, or like golgappa or pani puri chaat, whatever you call. Okay, you can see they are sometimes so young, right? 15 years, 16 years. I sometimes get surprised. And then I have also seen these children within 2-3 years getting married. Why? Because they had some money. They could get a room on rent, or they could purchase a little room because they were like saving, and then they get married. So child marriage or early marriage. And when early marriage will take place, then fecundity rate will increase, right? The time period of being fertile. Because if you're getting married at 30, you will produce maybe 1 or 2 children. You're getting married at 35, you may have 1 child or no child. You're getting married at 25, you may have 2 children. On a high side, also 3. You did not plan 3, it happened as such. So the longer the time period you have to produce children, the higher the possibility to like go for more number of children. And when there is poverty, there will be early marriage. Early marriage will lead to more number of children. And it's not just early marriage, more number of children, also supporting hands. So theory of wealth model, that can be connected. Again, urbanization, the challenges pertaining to urbanization, so all the slums, ghettos, informal sector, bring in all the points. Okay, urban-rural divide, whereby like development is urban-centric most of the times. Distress migration takes place. So you can bring in all that. Unequal access to technology. Technology is the new oil. Data is the new oil. And the community which is devoid of it is the one which will end up suffering. Okay, so you can talk about this. And then you can talk about addressing these challenges requires a multi-pronged approach involving government policies, social initiatives, community involvement. Now, before this, ये तो मैंने conclusion का paragraph. ठीक है? So before this given component associated with conclusion, before this, you should talk about how much is being spent. Okay, so talk about the possibility after this. The next para should be related to how economic development has articulated. Okay, economic development, the reasons responsible for it. Okay, the reasons, the factors, the players. Very briefly discuss about them. The reasons, the factors, the players responsible for economic development in India, connected to post-industrial economy, or the post-industrial society, which is related to skilled professionals. The economic development is associated with the IT sector, the service sector, which is associated with the skilled population of India. And when the economic development is happening from that sector, so to give a boost to economic development, the money is pumped more over in the urban areas and more over the metropolitan areas. So lack of decentralized development, okay, lack of decentralized development. Talk about budgetary allocation, okay, the budgetary allocation related to human development policies. How much budgetary allocation is there on education, on healthcare, on skill development, on employment generation, on planned urbanization, decentralized understanding of urbanization, all the above problems, man, all these points which we are seeing. Talk about all these points and how much is being spent on them. Okay. So budgetary allocation on human development policies. Okay. Then you can talk about, like we can say, policy evaluation. Policy evaluation. In policy evaluation, key points of gaps and challenges, which are related to these segments, these areas. All right. And after the gaps and challenges discussed related to the policy evaluation, then you can further move ahead and then you can talk about hence. Okay. Hence, okay, we can see that there is economic development, okay, but not human resource development. And after that, then in the conclusion, give the possibility of what needs to be done. In the conclusion, provide suggestions. That's how you are able to complete this given answer. So address these challenges. Addressing these challenges requires multi-pronged approach involving government policies, social initiatives, okay, budgetary allocation, community involvement. Okay, so budgetary allocation is investment. So investment in education, healthcare, infrastructure, social safety nets. So all of it you can incorporate. I hope that's making sense and everyone can understand what is the core demand of the question and how to decode it. Okay, then the next subcomponent, let me take something like challenging and charging, and then let us like reflect upon the other given possibilities pertaining to it. Okay, so with respect to this given dimension, we can further move ahead and we can like reflect upon the given dimension. Just a second. No, it's gone. It's there. You want to just take that? Yes, please. Thank you. So when we are talking about this, we all can further consolidate. Give me just 5 seconds. No problem. अपने बच्चे क्वेश्चन आंसर से निकाल लीजिए. ऐसा करिएगा इसको वहीं पर, वहां मैंने चार्जर रखा है. ये क्या हुआ? अच्छा ठीक है, दे दीजिए. मैं भूल गई थी फोन चार्ज करना, तो एक सेट ऑफ कमेंट्स मिस कर गए. बदल वाला जरूरी उसमें पलट दीजिए. Now, so we would be heading to the next question. Now, I'll take up question number 18 and 19 soon. See this 20th question. I was quite amazed by this 20th question, and I was like, I will just share like the critical understanding of it. Wait, this one. See this one. Discuss the impact of post-liberal economy on ethnic identity and communalism. See, though I have proposed the answer in the content, but I want to draw a flowchart and help at least the GS students and the ex-optional students like recall that what could have been the answer related to it. Okay. So in this given dimension, as we are going to like reflect upon the given answer, and as we would be substantiating the answer, I would be drawing a diagram and explaining the same. Now, what I have already furnished, let me share that with you. So impact of post-liberal economy, what is this? In other words, it's impact of globalization. All those who have done GS have told you multiple times whenever I have taught you the chapter of globalization, that whenever you discuss the chapter of globalization, not only reflect, because the topic is impact of globalization on Indian society, Okay, so impact of globalization on Indian society can be like a economic impact, political impact, social cultural impact, environmental impact. Then I said it can be impact of globalization on different communities, like aged population already asked, women already asked, similarly ethnic communities, right? And then I also shared connect the chapter of globalization with other topics, how globalization can trigger impoverishment, like poverty, chapter of poverty, how globalization will impact patterns of urbanization, how globalization will impact caste identity. Similarly, how globalization may encourage communalism and or secularism. Remember, all those who have done that, those who have not, get exposed. These things are taken up in the class. These approaches, potential areas from where questions can come, they are discussed in the class. And that's how you progress further ahead. So some content I have given so that you have some food for thought later once the lecture is over, and you can, like, reflect upon the content and develop the content accordingly. Meanwhile, with respect to this given area, when we are discussing about it, there is something that that can be drawn. So first, what has been created? Let us see. So we can see there are some key points which can be associated with the component of its impact on ethnic identity. So ethnic identity, economic growth, when it is happening. So economic growth will impact lifestyle, aspirations, values of the people, and hence it will impact the ethnic identity for sure. It is going to impact the ethnic and cultural backgrounds of the people for sure. Further, we can see with urbanization and mobility, what will happen? People will, like, they will migrate, they will move to different regions. As you are migrating, you are getting exposed to different customs, traditions, right? And as we are like reflecting upon the same, we all can like see a lot of possibilities unfold here as well. So what do we see? We all can see that when people are traveling, it is something which is like getting associated with, we can say, urban multicultural environments from the traditional we can say environments that people were exposed to. If they were living in a monocultural society, a society which was not diverse, it was associated with the dominance or presence of one ethnic community only, suddenly they become multicultural. Okay, so from monocultural to multicultural, those possibilities can also emerge because of globalization. That's something which we all can connect, right? Again, along with this, we all can also reflect upon a certain other, like we can say, changing dynamics or changing possibilities. That is, cultural exchange will take place because liberalization will facilitate cultural exchange. Like, for example, if any of you is, like, let's say, getting into the possibility of understanding that how ethnic communities are getting in touch with global community, you can see, like, for example, people since childhood were like remembering, I don't know your generation, because your and my generation is parted with 2 decades apart, so it's like a tremendous impact. But when we were children, I should talk about myself and my like generation, we were taught G and then H and I. So, like, G for whatever, goat or something like that, H for hat, I was for igloo. Okay, I for igloo. And the thing is, when you grow up and when you start understanding ethnicities and culture and communities, it is then that you understand that the term associated with igloo is, and the tribals living in an igloo is not a positive term. It's not a healthy term. It is only when you are exposed to this multiculturalism, you realize that it's not a balanced term. You should always use Inuit communities. Inuit, okay, I-N-U-I-T, Inuit communities. How did you come to know about it? Because when due to globalization, due to liberal economy, you got exposed to different cultures. So the person belonging to that community, while giving an interview, she said that, well, it is disrespectful when someone calls us communities belonging to igloos, Arctic regions. We would prefer to be referred as Inuit communities. Okay, when you read the books, the research work, the literature, you realize that it should be referred as Inuit communities. That's what. So when we talk about this given possibility of cultural exchange, we can understand that that is giving those we can say, ethnic communities which did not have their voice, which did not have their identities registered, that will get, like we can say, emanated, that will like come to the forefront. People will be able to witness that, they will be able to see that, okay, and get associated. So exposure to different cultures, as well as you can enrich your identity by this diversity. At the same time, there can be a challenge to ethnic identity. There can be a fear of loss, a fear of a loss with respect to cultural aggression. Like, for example, the Asura community of, we can say, pockets of Jharkhand and West Bengal, because of this cultural aggression. Because when the Asura community, young boys and girls, if they use their like title Asur, there's a fair challenge that, like, the younger generation, which is relatively hostile, may mock, oh, Asur, Rakshas, Daitya, okay, demon, like that, without understanding that the component of Sur and Asur was not associated with gods and demons. Sur was referred in many contexts to Aryans, and Asur was referred to non-Aryans, that is, indigenous or the tribal population. So when we are talking about these given possibilities, we can, like, substantiate the given idea related to what we understand with respect to the impact of globalization on ethnic identity. Okay, so ethnic identities can be under threat, and ethnic identities can also get hyphenated, right? Let's move ahead further and we can see this. So cultural preservation, we can see, on the other hand, economic liberalization will also make efforts to preserve and promote ethnic and cultural identity. So many dedicated websites, YouTube channels, encouraging you with respect to what kind of dress, food, like, music, literature, oral tradition, written tradition, right? The sculpture, architecture related to that ethnic community has existed. And thus preservation, protection, propagation becomes easier because of liberalization, liberally. Now you must be understanding there's positive and negative, both kind of impact related to ethnic identity. And mind it, this is the first part of the answer. Okay, first part of the answer. You have 250 words. That's why I'm like taking the liberty of explaining them as well. Identity politics, assertion politics will take place. Why? Because in a democracy, whereby people are not, we can say, people are not consolidated together, we all can consider this. Okay, all right, Vikash, I got your concern. I will look into that concern. Thank you. So when we are talking about this given dimension, that's paper 2. Okay, that's paper 2, social justice. We are discussing paper 1, so I'm not bringing in the insights of paper 2 right now. I'm just focusing on paper 1 and the question that we are in the process of discussing, that is associated with discuss the impact of post-liberal economy on ethnic identity. First part, and then we'll discuss the communism part. Okay. Now, so when we are talking about this identity politics, why identity politics will get hyphenated in the era of globalization. Now, this identity politics can qualify as a separate question in itself. Okay, globalization and identity politics. One full-fledged question can be asked, and you can prepare it for future. So whether the identity politics is pertaining to caste, gender, race, religion, all will get hyphenated. Because in democracy, when we can consider intellect is not prevailing, when insecurity and friction is prevailing, when diversity is not wholeheartedly accepted, in such a situation, the insecurity can encourage, mind it and remember that, the insecurity can encourage the given possibility of, we can say, communities playing the number game, contesting elections as if fighting with numbers. And when we can say the merit of a candidate is not on the basis of the agenda the person is fighting for, okay, we can say the promising character of the we can say the person who's contesting the election, rather than that, what is really given importance is associated with, we can consider the person's identity, and moreover, the person's identity with respect to ascribed status, that is caste, gender, religion, region. In that situation, we all can see this phenomena unfold. And that is what? So that is the person being able to gain vote on the name of the person's identity, matching the community which is voting for them. And this is emerging because of insecurity. That probably in the number game, if the person of my community is not elected, in that situation, my interests can be hampered, can be compromised. So that kind of possibility can also be understood or reflected upon. Okay, now further, when we are understanding this given dimension of, let's say, identity politics, we can further substantiate it, and we can see what possibilities can unfold. Here, we all can understand under the component of identity politics, we can understand that ethnic and regional groups will find that there is this assertion of one's rights and the community politics and the candidates elected accordingly. Okay, we can see consumerism can also impact the ethnic identity. For example, the patterns of food, dress, language that you're using, all that can get affected. Cultural products, all that can get affected. I mean, a lot of people will do away with their ethnic identity in terms of language. They will do away with their, we can say, folk ways. They will do away with, we can say, folk tradition, culture, right? And they will start accepting a language, the language of the market. So if the language of the market is pro-English, it will be pro-English. It will be pro some other vernacular language. They'll go for that language. In the process, somewhere identity and ethnicity will get compromised. So consumerism also shapes the consumption choices, the cultural products, clothing, food, all of it. Again, media and entertainment can also impact. We can consider it can also impact by reinforcing, we can say, challenges and traditional ethnic stereotypes and also narratives. So glorifying a specific thought process, glorifying a way of existence. So all that can be connected. Then further, we can think of this education and employment. Okay, and in terms of education and employment, when we are reflecting upon it, we can see that this dimension of education and employment can be connected with, we can consider different ethnic backgrounds. And when we are talking about different ethnic backgrounds, people are exposed to different levels of education and employment. This will lead to discrimination. Okay, discrimination, bias, divide, class divide, all that will also be a byproduct of liberal economy. Social integration may also experience both. It can expose a person to diversity and encourage the possibility of integration, but at the same time, those ethnic identities which will not be able to cope up with change, those identities which will not be able to, we can say, adjust and adapt to change, those communities will undergo this specific rigor of, we can say, loss of culture, and hence they may have a sense of resistance, hostility towards liberalization or towards liberal economy. All that can also be considered. You can also see, I have discussed this in terms of positive impact, like how when we are talking about the possibility of the component of ethnic identity with respect to how it is getting hyphenated. So positive as well as negative impact. Now, this component of communalism, let me explain this dimension again. Communalism, I will encourage you write more on negative side, less on positive side. Okay, what is communalism? Communalism is coming from the root word community. In the name of your community, when you regiment and you consider that your community is better than the rest, this community identity can be based on language, religion, region, whatever. Okay, so when you consider that your community is better than the rest, this identity, this insight related to, we can say, one's community is referred as communalism. Narrowly speaking, it is connected to religious communalism. A person who is regimented in the lines of one's religion is considered as communal. But truth is, if you go by the broader understanding of it globally, any regimentation in the lines of one's own community will be referred as communalism. So caste-based identity, ethnic identity, religious identity, regional identity, all of it will qualify under the canopy or the umbrella of communalism. Okay, but when we use the term communalism, generally it is associated with, we can consider the religious identity, right? But it is encouraged to all of you that you will, when you will be discussing about it, just briefly in one sentence explain this and then go ahead with the given possibility. So a lot of communities will get identity assertion. So very briefly you can talk about it, but focus more on the negative aspect. Now, why, like, the impact segment with respect to communalism, I will take it differently, because I'll again show you the question and accordingly draw the diagram this time. So the question, as you can see, it's written, discuss the impact of post-liberal economy on communalism. Okay, so the impact on communalism. Okay, so how the impact is the post-liberal economy is impacting communalism, how it is affecting communalism. So with respect to this, probably we can take up a brief diagram, okay, which can help you understand. So when you are talking about LPG economy, okay, so like let's say LPG economy, okay, and when we are, like, let's say, discussing about it, let me see, where is it come? Okay, yes, so like let's say there is LPG economy. So in liberalization, privatization, globalization, so liberalized, privatized, globalized economy, when we are moving further ahead, let us reflect upon the kind of change that it can articulate. So with all these possibilities, first and foremost, you will be talking about how it will lead to a new social order with respect to, we can say, economic changes. We can consider cultural, social changes. After cultural, social changes, then you can reflect it with respect to, we can say, like political changes. Okay, and then discuss how these changes are sudden plus tremendous. Then after discussing that how these changes are sudden and tremendous, then discuss how the norms have yet not established themselves. So there is, we can consider the society is undergoing transition. So transitional society. A transitional society is constantly trying to negotiate its own space with respect to what ought to be followed, what ought not to be followed. So in transitional society, when there is a sudden and tremendous change, it will lead to normlessness. When there is normlessness, it will lead to an emotion of, let's say, alienation or anomie. You can use either of the terms, alienation, anomie, and more importantly, plus insecurity. Alienation, anomie, and insecurity. Okay. Because of this, what will happen when we speak of it? So, because of this given possibility, I hope all of you can see this. Okay. So, because of this, you will be talking about a specific organization. Okay, an organization or a body will come into existence. Or I can, it's not necessary, I just draw it like this. I can probably the thread underneath. Okay, so just a second. Yes. So what you'll see is, because of this, when we are talking about it, so there is alienation and anomie. Here, then we all can see there is the role of an organization which will come into existence. So just a second. So there is a role of an organization which will reassert the identity. Okay, reassert identity plus extend protection. Okay, promise better future. Promise better future. And it can also encourage revivalism. Revivalism. So in this situation, an organization, this organization can be any organization. It can be a political organization. It can be a religious organization. It can be like working as a voluntary organization. It can be working as an NGO. It can be working as any of it. Okay, an educational organization. It can be a social media organization, okay, any of it. Now, when it is encouraging the possibility of, like, let's say, change, this organization is so because of this, what will happen? This alienated individual who's feeling insecure, who's experiencing anomie, okay, this individual will suddenly get a sense of, we can consider, belongingness, right? And then because of that, what will happen? So we will see that this individual will start like integrating. So the alienated ethnic or alienated ethnic group gets a new sense of integration, and identity. When it gets a new sense of integration and identity, because of which, what do we see? So we all can see, with a new sense of integration and identity, we can see over the time period, it leads to over-integration. And this over-integration will lead to ripen into ethnocentrism. This ethnocentrism, now I hope majority of you are able to recall the diagram. And this ethnocentrism will further ripen into fundamentalism. And this fundamentalism will lead to communal violence. Right? Okay. So liberal economy, this is the regressive aspect associated with it. In what ways has globalization, neoliberal economic policies contributed to communal tensions in India? And what strategies can be implemented to promote greater social harmony and cohesion? Yes. So first part of it has been already responded. And then the second part of it can be associated with the suggestions, which can boost social integration. All right. So that's how you can handle this given question. All right. Now, further, when we are speaking of it, we all can reflect. Where is the question? So just a second. So I hope all of you are able to understand this. So when you get this question, like the impact of post-liberal economy on ethnic identity. So ethnic identity impact can be positive as well as negative, both. Okay. But when we are talking about this component of negative, connect it with communalism. Okay. And communalism, how? So I've drawn the diagram. That's how you're supposed to create the answer. I hope all of you are getting an idea and you are able to like consolidate the given subsegments, right? Then comes the next subpart, that is, why is caste identity in India both fluid as well as static? Why? So if you reflect upon the question why, and then fluid, and then static. So I think sociology optional students will be quite comfortable and confident associated with this given answer, right? You must be feeling that, this is like literally picking up all the given subsegments associated with what I have studied so far. And like it just needs to be incorporated here and we can probably use the given dimensions accordingly, right? So, and that's probably the reason why, I would say, we tried to create this given segment. So with respect to it, when we are talking about the dimension of caste being a fluid identity and caste being a static identity, so fluid identity means caste system undergoing change. Okay. And it's not saying how it is undergoing change. The question is why it is undergoing change. Mind the word why. And then the component is like why it is static. If it is static, when we are talking about it. So why is it static? If it is static, and the we can say the factors which would be promoting the given possibilities of it being static. Okay, so that's what you will have to incorporate related to this given dimension. So when we are substantiating the given insights associated with it, let us further substantiate the points. So all of you, I hope, can recall all of you, if not majority of you, I should say. So majority of you, I hope you can recall that why this component of caste system is existing, right? And then I hope all of you can recall that the given subsegment that why it is getting undergoing a specific dimension of change. So I'm just reading all the comments that different students are writing from different platforms simultaneously to consolidate the given dimension. So with respect to continuity, when we are talking about it static, I think majority of you can connect. So when we are talking about the subsegment of caste system being static, okay. So with respect to this, we all can consider that there is this possibility of caste system being static, and then we can connect it with fluid. This side I'll write the points, and static this side I'll write. Okay. So when we are talking about caste system being static, we can connect it with religion. Right. When we are talking about religion, so somewhere the society, when it is deeply religious and caste system is endorsed by the religious practices, traditions, different types of customs, functions, which are specific to different caste groups who are supposed to perform those rituals and traditions. And those identities in our private affairs still continue, caste will continue to exist. Okay. Then after religious reasons, then you can also talk about the patterns of endogamy, which is still practiced. Endogamy means marrying within one's own community. That will also lead to caste-based identity getting hyphenated. Okay, just the key points I'm giving you. Okay, then you can also talk about the social traditions and cultural beliefs. So traditional and cultural beliefs, traditional and cultural beliefs. You can talk about the traditional and cultural beliefs as well. After traditional and cultural beliefs, you can also talk about the possibility of social stigma and discrimination. To my surprise, when I was interacting with Bhubaneswar students and also Rajasthan students, okay, so students from Odisha and Rajasthan, as well as few pockets of Madhya Pradesh, did accept that in different remote areas, there are still temples where the scheduled caste community or the Dalit community are not allowed entry. Imagine 75 years of independence and still a community is like a victim of social stigma and discrimination. Competent rights, cultural rights are not extended. And then we lament, oh my God, how come a person belonging to this community went for conversion? I mean, distressful situations may encourage such possibilities. We can also see there can be political and economic interests. So political and economic interests, which can also hyphenate, we can say, caste identity, encourage the caste identity to prevail, okay, to exist. We can also see the enforcing laws may not be profound, okay. So we can say lack of sufficient enforcement, right? So lack of sufficient enforcement, lack of sufficient enforcement. Okay, so lack of sufficient enforcement, talk about the affirmative action, the implementation of discriminatory laws, how it is not taking place at all times. Then you can talk about social isolation related to various customs, traditions. You can talk about sometimes communities can be settled in segregated colonies, and they are not allowed to be a part of some mainstream colony, okay, in some rural area, township area, okay, whereby it is dedicated to a specific community. So that social isolation, whereby discriminatory patterns of residence and existence, okay, also delimits the given possibility. Again, the patterns of inheritance in caste. So inheritance of caste identity, or we can say inheritance of caste with respect to like the caste status being passed. So you are socializing the child into that thought process. So inheritance of caste connected with socialization of a child. Okay. After inheritance of the caste, you can further talk about the possibility of resistance of change. A lot of communities, they have this resistance of change. So if Marx would have been there, he would have said that anyone who is a have and who is benefiting out of the situation, why would the person like exercise social reform or accept any kind of reform? The person is benefiting from the situation, so the person will aspire that let it exist, let that pattern of, we can say, dimension exist, right? Now, with respect to this, we can also talk about the given possibility of, like, let's say, how caste system is undergoing change, because it is like it's a fluid identity. So with respect to fluid identity, we all can reflect upon a lot of dimensions. First and foremost, we can talk about urbanization and urbanization, modernization, and along with urbanization and modernization, you can talk about the fluidity occurring because of the principles of urbanization and modernization, whereby an individual is exposed to, like, let's say, a rational thought process, so connected with rationality. After that, you can also talk about modern education. So we can say modern education, right? Connected with the possibilities related to modern education, connected with inter-caste marriages, inter-caste, inter-community marriages. After that, you can also talk about like social movements. So social reforms, movements, right? After that, you can also talk about legal protections. Okay. So legal, I don't know what fell. From my end, nothing fell. Oh, here. Here something has fallen. And from where? Gira kahan se? Acha, okay. ऊपर से फिर सर पे तो नहीं गिरा. No problem. Just let it be. So we can consider the component of here. So social reforms, and then after that I was discussing about legal. Yeah. So legal, we can say amendments. So legal amendments, you can talk about it. Again, legal amendments, protections, and then we can next talk about the given possibility of political representation. Political representation. Under the component of political representation, you can also add the subsegment of reservation. So the fluidity shall happen whereby more and more like communities will feel like being a part of this. Okay. And after this, then you can talk about, in the conclusion, you can talk about the possibility that despite these so-called changes, caste-based discrimination and violence continues to exist and shape the identity of a modern individual. Okay, so talk about caste discrimination and violence. Caste discrimination, violence, and what steps are needed, plus the steps needed to do away with it. Okay, very briefly. That's how you can discuss both the segments, that is fluidity and static, because question is why? Why is the identity fluid, and then why is the identity static? No, like 10 points this side, 7-8 points this side, you will be able to like substantiate the answer. I hope all of you are able to understand that. That brings us to the last question. Okay, the last question, which was associated with this one. You can see, I tried to make it as exhaustive as possible, and I understand that like there is so much that has to be further created. Okay, now with respect to this, does urbanization lead to more segregation and or marginalization of the poor in Indian metropolises? Okay, so when we are reflecting upon this given dimension associated with more segregation, How has communalism emerged as a challenge to India's pluralistic and secular ethos? And how can we address? Um, well, I hope you have understood this given dimension, how it has emerged as a challenge to pluralistic and secular ethos. It has, because communalism will like encourage identity politics, segregation, hatred, insecurity, and all this will somewhere impact the given possibility of acceptance of diversity. Diversity is emerging in the space and scope where there is security, where there is sense of tolerance, where there is acceptance, where there is harmonization of interest, where there is embracing plurality. Okay, so we can see that somewhere pluralism and secularism will get affected due to communalism. And then second aspect which you are saying, that how can we address it effectively? Well, it can be addressed quite effectively if you remember the suggestions. First and foremost, we can talk about promoting modern laws. Any law which promotes equality and diversity, which safeguards equality and diversity, because equality and diversity in one aspect of life, in one walk of life, shall promote modernity, equality, and diversity in other walks of life. It cannot be possible that a person is talking about, gender equality, but talking about religious discrimination. A person who believes in discrimination will believe in discrimination of other patterns also. We'll talk about primarily religious discrimination, but will also accept caste-based discrimination, and then gender-based discrimination. So it's not possible that a person is exercising discrimination only from one perspective. That's what you all can understand. Okay. Another, we can say, suggestion, as you are asking, that what can be other ways in which we can address without compromising on diversity and democracy. You can promote education, cultural exchange. If I quote Professor Dipankar Gupta, he said that a lot of insecurity, a lot of divide, a lot of doubt and mistrust, it remains because communities are unable to trust each other. Communities are unable to be with each other. And the reason is lack of regular interaction. If there is absence of interaction between communities, friction can exist. So we need to understand how to improve interaction between communities. That is through regular programs, regular exchange programs, cultural programs, social programs, whereby communities are coming together and interacting. Dipankar Gupta said that if communalism is a social movement, it should be countered. Sorry, Dipankar Gupta, he said. Bipin Chandra, Professor Bipin Chandra, he said, if communalism is a social movement, let us counter it with another social movement which is based on plurality and diversity. Other methods you can talk about is police reforms, whereby sensitization in the face of communalism. Whenever communal violence happens, there is human rights violation. So how about addressing the human rights violation by, we can say, in-time addressal of first aid, in-time addressal of safety and security to women, children. Okay, we can say addressing issues in the long run pertaining to poverty, discrimination, hate speech. Okay, we can also see intervention can come with respect to quick and time-bound addressal of such cases. Okay, so judicial intervention in a time-bound manner, so that faith and trust in judiciary is intact. It can be associated with effective disaster management, whereby whenever there is a communal violence, time-bound addressal of human rights and effective support is created. We can also think of investigation agencies, the role of investigation agencies, that whenever they are tipped with any information that there is a communal violence that is being designed or articulated, they are able to address that issue. Okay, they are able to make a difference with respect to that issue. So that's how you can probably consolidate all these given subsegments. That's what I can say. All right. So now moving ahead to the last question, as I was suggesting, this given dimension related to it. So with respect to this, when we are talking about urbanization, greater segregation and marginalization of poor in Indian metropolises, there are two parts of this question. First is urbanization leading to segregation. And then second part of the question is urbanization leading to marginalization. And that is how I have prepared the material for all of you to reflect and read. Okay. So factors that have contributed to segregation and how that segregation is taking place. Okay. So first, a basic understanding with respect to what is urbanization, but how there are various factors which has led to this urbanization, which leads to segregation. So we can consider this segregation where housing cost is expensive. So not every community is able to afford good quality housing. Similarly, limited access to services can be associated with this segregation. So dividing the communities in terms of the quality of education, healthcare, sanitation facilities which are provided, employment opportunities which are provided. Social discrimination can also lead to the segregation if we reflect upon the given points, right? Again, we can see land use policies. So you can create zones of segregation. Like, for example, I remember in Delhi, near the civil lines area, there were zones of segregation whereby slums are existing near Majnu Gatila or near the Tibetan colony, and where, like, the civil lines posh area, Rajpur Road and all the areas are isolated so that they don't experience the rigor of crime and the frictions associated with the communities trespassing their areas. Okay, there are gated societies, housing colonies. You can think of all that also. There can be transportation barriers. So poor transportation for the lower income groups, like you can see like buses which are in a dilapidated condition. Okay, whereas for the relatively middle income groups, you can have better infrastructure, and for rich, you can have other sets of, we can say, infrastructure which is facilitating their ease of movement. Okay. Then further, you can see the given possibility pertaining to implications of segregation, what impact it can generate. Very briefly, because the question is not on impact of segregation. Mind the question. Always memorize the question. Does urbanization lead to more segregation? You will be talking yes, and why? What are the reasons? Okay. What will be the impact? Preferably write it in one sentence. I've given the points with elaboration, but just mention one sentence, comma, key points. Okay. So what are the points? All of you can see it over here. So you can see it can lead to, if I were you, I would have written that this social segregation or the segregation related to urbanization further leads to social inequality, comma, health disparities, comma, educational gaps, because then elaboration will be a repetition of it, right? Okay, lack of social cohesion, comma, and challenges pertaining to urban development, full stop. That's it. Okay. And after this, then you can further, like here I have given very briefly some suggestion that how to do away with this segregation. So let us have a holistic approach to the idea of development, which is like associated with affordable housing, improving access to basic services, promoting inclusive urban planning, then systemic discrimination should be addressed, all these segments, and then talk about the given possibility of marginalization, how urbanization can lead to marginalization. Marginalization means you're thrown to the corner. You're marginalized, you're thrown to the corner. Many people will think segregation, marginalization is one and the same thing. Segregation is separating, prying you and making you different. Marginalization, after differentiating, you are pushed to the corner. Okay, so that's an extreme version. Okay, so then you can talk about limited employment opportunities. With respect to housing and land cost, it will soar up so high that you won't be able to afford it. Any decent housing, that will not be there. Again, this marginalization can be associated with inadequate services, the informal economy, and this informal economy will lack job security. There will be irregular income. Okay, there will be lack of social protection. All these key points you can reflect. Then further, you can see this land displacement, social discrimination will be at a high level. Okay, we can see limited mobility of the community because marginalized. That's what. So when they are marginalized, they will not be able to easily move from one area to another. It is this community which also suffered during COVID, if you remember, because getting back to their homes became a challenge. People who are well off could afford flights and could move back by following the norms and protocols. But it is those who could not afford a railway ticket or were overburdened. It is they who were crushed under the, we can say, wheels of the train. We could see these were the people who are dying on the roads. These were the people who were unable to, cope up to their homes, or even after reaching their homes, they died due to fatigue or due to malnourishment. So all that you can recall, limited mobility. This marginalization will push you to the possibility of, struggling even for survival. Again, lack of political representation will make you voiceless. So you won't be able to raise your voice for your rights and needs. Okay. And then a brief suggestion related to how you can address the issue of marginalization, how you can create the dimension related to marginalization. Okay. So this is what you're supposed to deal with in terms of this question paper. As promised, I'll take a lecture on it. This is the lecture, and I hope it was relatively satisfactory for all of you, whereby all the important points were brought to context. And I hope now the paper is now seemingly easy. It's seemingly doable. And you must be realizing that remembering structures of core points related to important topics is essential. When you remember structures, capability to reproduce is higher. All right. So thank you all of you for your patience. If there are any other questions, I will be there for another few minutes, and I will be taking up your questions if needed. So just let me know if there are any questions associated with this given area. I'll just check all the, we can say, groups once again. It seems everything is good. Everyone is so silent in the other two groups. Okay, all right. Either you're understanding everything, or you are in a state of ease and comfort, trance, or not connected. Whatever it is. All right. So all good, all of you. So shall I call off the session? So thank you for being a part of this session. And all those students who would be attending this session later, feel free to write your comments. I would be one of them. Take care. Have a great day ahead.